Ancient healers had perfect vision into old age. Not all of them, but enough of them, and consistently enough, that the physicians who studied these healers noticed a pattern. The healers who maintained their vision longest were not simply fortunate. They were not exceptions of nature. They were people who did specific things every morning, deliberately, consistently, for decades, that protected the most extraordinary organs in the human body, their eyes. We live in a time when the deterioration of vision is considered normal, expected, inevitable, a consequence of aging that must simply be accepted and managed with lenses and eventually with surgery. Ancient healers did not accept this. They believed, and their practice demonstrated, that the eyes, like every other organ in the body, responded to care, to specific nutrients, to specific habits, to the way a person treated their eyes from the moment they woke until the moment they slept. They were right. And modern ophthalmology, the science of the eye, has now confirmed with extraordinary precision what ancient healers observed through decades of patient care. The eye is the most metabolically active organ in the body per unit of weight. It consumes more oxygen, more nutrients, and produces more metabolic waste than almost any other tissue. It is also one of the most exposed organs, facing light, heat, environmental toxins, and oxidative stress every waking hour. Ancient healers understood that this exposure came at a cost, that the eyes, more than any other organ, needed daily protection, not occasional treatment, but consistent, deliberate morning nourishment to maintain the clarity and strength that carried a person through decades of life. In ancient India, Ayurvedic physicians placed eye health at the center of their morning practice. They developed detailed protocols for protecting and strengthening the eyes that were performed each morning before any other activity. They called this Netra Kriya, eye care as medicine, and they prescribed it to every patient, regardless of the condition they came to be treated for. They understood that the eyes that served you well in youth would only continue to serve you in age if you gave them what they needed every single day. In ancient China, physicians who studied the relationship between organ health and the condition of the eyes developed one of the most sophisticated eye care systems in healing history. They observed that the eyes were not isolated organs, but the visible endpoints of pathways that ran through the liver, the kidneys, and the blood. They prescribed specific morning foods and specific morning practices to nourish these pathways. Understanding that eye health began not in the eye itself, but in the whole body systems that supplied it. In ancient Egypt, healers who served in the great temples documented specific morning rituals for the preservation of vision. Rituals that were preserved in papyrus scrolls and practiced for centuries by those who had access to this knowledge. What these healers discovered, each through their own tradition, each through their own centuries of observation, was the same fundamental truth. The eyes that remained clear and strong into old age were the eyes that were nourished, protected, and exercised every single morning, without exception, without days off. Here is exactly what they did. The first thing ancient healers did every morning for their eyes was something so simple that most people today would consider it unremarkable. They washed their eyes with cool, clean water. Not a casual splash. A deliberate, thorough washing. Cupping clean, cool water in the palms and immersing the open eyes. Blinking repeatedly to flush the entire surface of the eye and the inner corners where the tear ducts collected the waste and discharge of the night. Ayurvedic physicians were specific about the temperature. Cool, but not cold. Clean, but not treated with chemicals. They were specific about the method. The eyes opened fully in the water. The gaze moving in all directions while submerged to ensure the entire surface was cleansed. During sleep, the eyes accumulate metabolic waste, dried tear film, bacteria from the environment, and the cellular debris of tissue that repairs itself through the night. Ancient healers understood that this accumulation, if left on the surface of the eye throughout the morning, caused the low-grade inflammation that slowly degraded the clarity of vision over years. They removed it first thing, every morning, before any food, before any activity, before the eyes were asked to work again. The second morning practice was one that Ayurvedic healers specifically prescribed for the deep nourishment of the tissues that maintained the structural integrity of the eye. They ate one specific food before anything else: dark, leafy greens. Specifically, spinach, moringa leaf, or dark watercress, eaten raw or very lightly cooked as the first solid food of the morning. Ancient healers observed that people who ate dark green leaves regularly, as a daily morning practice rather than an occasional addition to meals, maintained sharper vision to older ages than those who did not. They described these foods as the nourishment of the inner light. Their way of saying that something in dark green leaves fed the eyes in a way that no other food replicated. They were describing lutein and zeaxanthin, the two carotenoid pigments found in highest concentration in dark leafy greens. Lutein and zeaxanthin are the primary protective pigments of the macula, the central area of the retina responsible for sharp, detailed vision. They filter the high-energy blue light that damages photoreceptors. They reduce oxidative stress in the retinal tissue. They maintain the density of the macular pigment that keeps central vision clear and sharp. The retina cannot produce lutein and zeaxanthin on its own. It must receive them from food. Every morning that a person ate dark leafy greens, they were restocking the macular pigment that protected their central vision. Every morning they did not, that pigment was slightly depleted. Ancient healers understood this through observation over lifetimes. Modern retinal science understands it through biochemistry. Both say the same thing: eat dark leafy greens every morning. The third morning practice was one that ancient Chinese physicians specifically developed as part of their eye care system. A practice so effective that it has been used continuously in traditional Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years. Eye acupressure, the gentle stimulation of specific pressure points around the eyes. Ancient Chinese physicians identified a series of points around the orbital bone, the bone that surrounds the eye socket, where gentle pressure improved the circulation of blood and energy to the eye. They prescribed the stimulation of these points each morning as a mandatory practice for anyone who wished to protect their vision. The practice takes less than 2 minutes. The index fingers are used to apply gentle circular pressure to 8 points around each eye, beginning at the inner corner of the eye, moving upward along the brow bone, across the outer corner, and downward along the cheekbone below the eye. Each point receives 10 seconds of gentle circular pressure. Both eyes are treated simultaneously. The pressure is firm enough to feel the bone beneath the skin, but never enough to cause discomfort. Ancient Chinese physicians observed that patients who practiced this acupressure consistently showed better maintenance of visual acuity with age. They attributed this to the improvement in circulation to the eye, the increased delivery of oxygen and nutrients to the retina and the lens and the optic nerve. Modern research has confirmed that circulation to the eye is one of the primary determinants of long-term visual health. The eye is supplied by a single artery, the ophthalmic artery, and any reduction in blood flow to this artery has measurable effects on the health of the retina and the optic nerve. 2 minutes of gentle pressure each morning. The ancient Chinese physicians called this the morning gift to the eyes. The fourth morning practice was one that ancient Indian healers prescribed with the same consistency and the same conviction as every other element of their morning eye care protocol. They ate a specific fruit or drank its juice every single morning without exception. Amla, the Indian gooseberry. Amla is the richest natural source of vitamin C of any food on earth. A single small amla contains 20 times more vitamin C than an orange. And vitamin C is not simply an immune vitamin. It is the primary antioxidant of the aqueous humor, the fluid that fills the anterior chamber of the eye and nourishes the lens. The lens of the eye, the structure responsible for focusing light onto the retina, is maintained in clarity by antioxidants. When oxidative stress exceeds the antioxidant protection available, proteins in the lens begin to aggregate and cloud. The result, over years and decades, is the loss of transparency that we call a cataract. Ancient Indian healers did not know about aqueous humor or oxidative stress or protein aggregation, but they observed consistently across thousands of patients over centuries that people who consumed amla daily maintained clearer vision for longer. They observed that patients who began consuming amla after vision changes had already begun, sometimes showed an improvement rather than a continuation of decline. They prescribed it every morning, specifically in the morning, because they understood, without the biochemistry to explain it, that the eye did its most intensive metabolic work in the morning hours and needed its protective compounds delivered at the beginning of the day. If amla is unavailable in your region, the closest alternatives are kiwi fruit, guava, or a small glass of pure orange juice taken first thing in the morning. The principle is the same. High vitamin C delivered to the eye before the full demands of the day begin. The fifth morning practice was one that ancient Egyptian healers specifically associated with the preservation of long-distance vision. The ability to see clearly at a distance that was critical for healers who read scrolls, for scholars who studied, and for anyone whose work required sustained visual focus. They performed a specific eye exercise, one that modern optometrists now call palming and focusing, every single morning before their work began. The practice involves 2 phases. In the first phase, both hands are rubbed vigorously together until warmth is generated in the palms. The warm palms are then cupped gently over the closed eyes, not pressing on the eyes, but creating a warm, dark space around them. The eyes remain closed in this warm darkness for 2 full minutes. No light enters. The eyes release the tension of waking and the habitual focus that begins the moment the eyes open each morning. Ancient Egyptian healers called this phase the rest before the work. They observed that patients who began this practice reported that their vision was clearer and sharper in the hours after performing it than in hours when they did not. In the second phase, the palms are removed and the eyes open. The patient focuses on the most distant object visible: a tree, a building, a horizon. They hold this distant focus for 30 seconds. Then they shift focus to an object very close: a finger held at arm's length, gradually brought toward the face until it blurs. They hold this near focus for 30 seconds. Then back to the distant object. This alternating focus exercise strengthens the ciliary muscles, the muscles that control the lens of the eye and adjust its shape to focus at different distances. These muscles, like all muscles, weaken without exercise and strengthen with regular, deliberate use. Ancient healers prescribed this exercise specifically for patients whose work required sustained reading or close-up focus. Understanding that the eye muscles could be fatigued by repetitive near focus, just as any other muscle could be fatigued by repetitive physical work. The exercise counteracted this fatigue before it began. Every morning, before the eyes were put to work. The sixth morning practice was the one that ancient Chinese physicians described as the most fundamental of all. The practice without which all other eye care was less effective. They ate one egg, specifically the yolk, every morning.
Ancient Chinese physicians who studied eye health made a specific observation about eggs and vision that their colleagues in other traditions confirmed independently. They noted that patients who ate one egg yolk daily maintained better visual acuity for longer than patients who did not, and that the effect was most pronounced in patients whose vision had already begun to decline. They were prescribing, without knowing it, the richest food source of lutein and zeaxanthin available in the ancient world. The egg yolk contains these carotenoids in a highly bioavailable form, bound to fat in a way that the body absorbs far more efficiently than the same compounds found in vegetables. But the egg yolk offers something beyond lutein and zeaxanthin. It contains choline, which the brain and the retinal neurons use to maintain signal transmission. It contains zinc, the mineral the retina uses in higher concentrations than almost any other tissue in the body. And it contains DHA, the omega-3 fatty acid that makes up 30% of the fatty acids in the photoreceptors of the retina. The photoreceptors that convert light into the electrical signals the brain interprets as vision are built largely from DHA. Without sufficient DHA, their function declines. With consistent daily DHA from eggs, they maintain their structural integrity and their sensitivity to light. Ancient Chinese physicians called the egg yolk the morning sun of the eye. They were describing, in the poetry of their language, a biochemical reality that modern retinal science has since confirmed in extraordinary detail. 1 egg yolk every morning, soft cooked, never fully hardened, so the delicate fats and carotenoids are not degraded by high heat. The 7th morning practice was one that ancient healers across every tradition listed last, but only because it was the one performed at the end of the morning routine, after all other practices were complete. They spent 5 minutes in gentle morning sunlight, eyes open, facing away from the direct sun, allowing the diffuse early morning light to reach the eyes. Ancient Ayurvedic physicians prescribed exposure to early morning sunlight as essential for eye health. Specifically, the golden light of the first hour after sunrise, before the sun had risen to the angle where its intensity could cause harm. They observed that patients who spent time outdoors in morning light maintained better vision and better mood than those who remained indoors in the early hours. They did not understand the mechanism, but they prescribed the practice consistently. Early morning light exposure stimulates the production of dopamine in the retina. Dopamine is not simply a brain chemical. In the retina, it plays a critical role in regulating eye growth and maintaining the structural integrity of the retinal tissue. It is also the primary signal that regulates the circadian rhythm, the body's internal clock, which in turn regulates the daily cycle of repair and restoration that the eye requires to maintain its health across decades. 5 minutes outdoors in the early morning, eyes open, facing away from the direct sun, breathing the morning air. The ancient healers called this feeding the eyes with the first light of the day. Modern ophthalmology calls it a protective factor against myopia progression and retinal degeneration. Both are describing the same 5 minutes. 7 morning practices: cool water washing, dark leafy greens, eye acupressure, vitamin C-rich fruit, palming and focusing exercises, 1 egg yolk, 5 minutes of morning light. Not complicated, not expensive, not requiring anything that was not available to people 3,000 years ago, and not requiring anything that is not available to you this morning. Ancient healers had perfect vision into old age because they understood that the eyes were not passive recipients of the aging process. They were responsive organs that declined when neglected and maintained themselves when nourished. They built that nourishment into the fabric of every morning, not as an occasional health initiative, as a permanent, non-negotiable part of the day that began before anything else was asked of the eyes. You do not need to begin all 7 practices tomorrow. Begin with 1. The cool water washing takes 60 seconds. The dark leafy greens take no longer to prepare than any other breakfast food. The 5 minutes of morning light requires only that you step outside. Begin with the one that requires the least change to your current morning. Then add another. The ancient healers built their vision practice 1 morning at a time. So can you. If this gave you something useful today,
share it with one person whose vision you want to protect. A parent whose sight has been slowly fading. A friend who spends long hours in front of screens. Someone who has been told that their vision will only get worse. The healers always shared what they knew. That is exactly how this knowledge survived for thousands of years. Subscribe to Ancient Body Wisdom and come back every single week, because there is so much more they knew, and we are only just beginning. I will see you in the next one.